Hi, my name is Dan Zeilinger, and I have been a world-traveling full-time trad jazz musician for the past 40 years. Some of my most memorable performances were on the lawn of the Edinburgh Castle, at Imperial Palace in Japan, as well as TV shows and commercials across the world. I've met many people during my career and have spent many hours on stage and off with these musicians, talking about jazz, life, and more. Some are touring musicians, some are theme park warriors, and some are casual musicians who play on the weekends with friends. I think they all have stories worthy of a movie script, and through these interviews, I'll be sharing them with you. Hi there, this is Dan Zeilinger with Trad Jazz Today. My next guest is somebody who has a big piece of my heart. I don't think he really quite realizes how fond I am of him and of our memories and time together, because we've always fought for work, actually. And that's true with a lot of the people I've interviewed, you know, whether or not for somehow I managed to, John Van Houten, I managed to know a lot of tuba players, and that's because I started on trumpet, to be honest. And so a lot of these guys that we compete for the same work in the same area, but we're great friends. And this is Mr. Charles Warren. But you prefer Chaz now.
Oh, whatever is fine. Brad renamed me Chaz. So. And
oh, did he? I like Charlie.
Okay, go.
I knew Charlie, the guy on the rowing team, and the guy who used to eat a bottle of ketchup on every one of his hamburgers. And
yes.
Surprised, aren't you, that I remember this stuff?
Yeah. I'll tell you what I remember. We were alone one Thanksgiving, just the two of us. Both of our parents had taken off. And we were kind of moping until you said, hey, let's go over to my sister's house. And holy cow, they had all sorts of food, and they were just so glad we came over to eat it. And man, I'll never forget that.
Yeah, that's what you get when you eat at a Filipino's house, you know? It's a... Yeah. Actually, I think it was my mom's house. And I think Gary Halapoff may have been over that night, and a lot of my friends from those days, we used to invite over anytime we had a feed. And my mom just cooked for days, and my sister, of course, and unfortunately, anyway. So let's talk about y'all. I didn't realize, I guess I should have realized that you were a Newport Beach native.
Yeah. Both my parents were both born in Santa Ana, and they just stayed in the area pretty much.
Did you go to Kaiser Junior High?
No, I went to a Horace Sensen, which was literally across the street from my house.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Tough life.
Oh, yeah.
Newport Beach on the ocean, walk across the street to your school.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you know, somebody had to do it.
And then you ended up at Newport Harbor.
Right.
With everybody. I mean, I tell people about the golden age of Southern California when it came to classic jazz and players.
Yeah.
Name some of the people from that era that we all kind of grew up with. You were there before I was.
Sure. Yeah. Well, a couple years ahead of me, Larry Wright, who then was Lawrence Wright, and Paul Woltz. We were both in the same jazz band together. Actually, we called it a stage band at Newport Harbor.
You'll be interested. Paul's my next interview today.
Oh, terrific. Say hi. He is my all-time hero. His bass sax playing is unrivaled in my ears.
Agreed. Go on. Who else?
Oh, so anyway, yeah.
I'm writing down, say hi from Charlie.
Oh, okay. And then after they had moved on, then the next batch came, which was Brian Shaw and Danny Barrett. And of course, all of them played together. Local pizza parlor gigs that I would sit out in the audience and just be in awe that they could just be coming up with stuff and just playing so great. Dan Barrett, as with many people, became a very good personal mentor to me later in college. But excuse me, I learned so much from those guys. And who knew? Yeah, it was, like you say, kind of a golden age.
It was just crazy. And then aside from the trad guys, you had the Tom Kubises and Tom Savianos and Dave Diggs and Dave Siebels and do you remember Mike Ash?
Oh, sure, of course, yeah.
I just recently could remember his name, but
wow. Yeah.
For those of you watching, he was one of the student conductors at Orange Coast College as Charlie and I were going through the college, learning how to conduct.
Yeah, and a tremendous violinist, which I didn't know. And he got me my first steady gig playing string bass at a place called Baxter Street, which was by what was then Orange County Airport. I don't know what it's called now.
Yeah,
But
me neither.
we were piano and bass behind a group of 6 singers doing light opera and the like, kind of a dinner show.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I did that for probably 3 or 4 years. Got me through
Wow.
college.
Yeah, I just know that it was kind of funny. Our teacher at the time was a guy named Charles Rutherford, which we all called Doc.
Yeah.
And one of the great things about him is when he got a new piece or a piece that he didn't particularly want to conduct, he would call one of us up to the front. I realized that he had me doing the planets, because he didn't want to deal with 5/4.
Yeah.
And I tell people, I know you probably might have. I tell them about the story about you conduct me at Star Spangled Banner.
I remember it.
You remember the story?
I remember it. The band started pulling back, and I thought, I'm looking for the retard, and so I went with them.
Oh, it was. I wish. In fact, I'm going to use it in a movie someday, because they started to slow down, which is, of course, not really the tradition, but a lot of modern people who play it like to slow down and then ramp it up for the last chorus, and the da 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 da, and you look down at the score, and I think I was playing trumpet that day, maybe,
Yeah.
just laughing hysterically. And it was so much fun.
Yeah.
And of course, I tell everybody that I met you in college. Kids, first of all, people can't believe that I know you, because you are a name to be reckoned with in the tuba world now. And in fact, they say that about a lot of the people I claim to know. They don't believe that I know. But it's because I started playing as a trumpet player. You knew me as a trumpet player, pretty much.
Right. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Good trumpet player.
Well, where do I send the check?
No, I mean, you sat in with sections with Mike Paulson and Daryl Gardner, and you were playing with some real cats.
Gary, and
Yeah.
I just hooked back up with Mike Paulson again, by the way.
Wow.
He now is he's still working on brass instruments and Mike Paulson brass. I think just about 4 months ago, we found each other online and we're talking still. And remember Jim, his brother.
Sure.
Of course, that band, that famous picture. I don't do pictures on this show. It's just purely about, but it's purely about conversation, because I miss people. It's the main reason I started this, and musicians especially, of course. And there's a great picture of Charlie and I in the Orange Coast College Jazz Band. He was playing fifth trombone parts, right? The bass trombone parts.
Yeah, actually, I was playing fourth trombone. Lynn Wicks covered fifth.
Oh,
So,
and we even had Eileen on French horn. I don't remember her last name in that picture.
yeah, I don't recall either.
And Frank Perry was in the trumpet section.
Yeah.
And all of us, that was a crazy time. Paul Krybeck was playing drums.
Yeah.
I mean, they're heavy. I interviewed Tom Kubis. We were talking about that day, the day I walked into that band, and I was just a stupid freshman. And I passed out a chart that I made in high school and basically felt like I got laughed out of the room because I didn't realize what I had walked into.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Wow. There's just some, and people like you, man, that went through all that program. I'm ahead of myself, though. I want to go back to Newport Harbor High.
Great.
You were there, what year did you graduate?
70.
70. So you were there several years before Dan and Brian and those guys.
Right, yeah.
Maybe 3 years or so.
Yeah, when I was a senior, Brian was a sophomore and Dan a freshman.
Yeah. People don't believe me. Brian told me once that he really didn't read that well early days of Newport Harbor. And then he started taking lessons with Pappy Mitchell, who kind of whipped him into shape.
Hmm.
And then he and I used to spend just hours in the practice room, sight reading through fake books and things. I mean, those guys are the ones who got me into the style. Because if you remember, right, I was playing Latin bands and big bands when I got into Orange Coast College.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, when did you take up Serpent?
Serpent, oh my gosh. I was into early music, recorders and stuff, kind of since the end of college. I finished up at Cal State Fullerton,
Right. I
and
see.
then I just got into early music, and so I started playing, recorders, of course, and then added sack butt, and then what is this serpent thing? So I did that for a couple of years. I've still got it up in the attic somewhere.
Yeah, I guess from what I've seen online, Beth has gotten into that too.
Yes,
Beth Mitchell, you guys are all crazy.
yeah.
That's, I mean, if you want to hear your lips buzzing through a pipe, it's. But that was what they used for bass instruments up until
Yeah,
they have the Yelful Clyde, which is another. Have you tried those yet?
sure.
Oh, I haven't. Tell me about it.
Well, it's slightly better than a serpent. It's like with a serpent, the fingerings are optional. It's pretty much like, blowing into blowing into a tuba with all the valves half valved. You can just put anything you want wherever you want it. Awful Clyde is maybe just half the valves.
Kind of a metal bassoon, right? More or less, or
Yeah.
that you buzz into.
Right. Yeah. Pads like a saxophone.
Can you imagine trying to play those in a marching band? Because that's what they were doing with those things, and sit down bands.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Thank goodness for tuba players. Now you were at OCC for what, 3 years or 4 years?
I kind of came and went. I was there for 2 years. I was an engineering major. Then I went off to Cal State Long Beach, stayed there a year, and I was just drowning. Physics, chem, all those subjects were just kicking me. And so I took like an aptitude test. They offered one at the university. And number one on the list came music performer. And I thought, what is that? I've never even heard of such a thing. So I found out and then pretty much restarted, went back to OCC. And just from there on, it was just music classes.
Yeah. Just to sort of bring the audience up to date with a few things we were talking about before we started the introduction. When I first met Charlie Warren, I always envied just his physique. He was on the crew team at Orange Coast College. He worked out. He was a dedicated athlete. And wow, I know you used to go down to the Newport Harbor, what was it, the Sea Scouts
Yeah.
area, and go with the Coast Crew team. Just, I mean, and anyway, so I wanted to hang out with him a lot because he attracted all the girls, and which I did, and we started hitting some parties, and just as something to do for the heck of it, we actually developed a comedy duo for several parties. There was a Canadian comedy team at the time, Wayne and Schuster, and I talked Charlie into memorizing a couple of their routines, and we had great fun with that.
It's all a blur to me.
Professor Bernardi and his talking dog, and the bit of the routine was the fact that you would start this interview, and everybody would assume that the person being interviewed was actually the professor, and the other one was the dog, and it turned out to be just the opposite. Yeah, it's pretty fun. And then I think we also did the whipped cream diet, maybe off that album. I don't remember. Oh, there was another bit where the guy presents a whipped cream diet, and he says, I have whipped cream on everything from eggplant to hamburgers and everything. And the interviewer finally goes, really? So you find this to be healthy? He goes, oh yeah, I was a 75-pound mess before I started this. Anyway, I tried it. Look where it got me. Okay, so who did you study under when you were in college, particularly?
The first guy I studied under, I was a string bass player at Orange Coast. And I studied under this amazing guy named Robert Ciccarelli.
Oh, sure.
He was,
He
wow.
was a jazz guy too. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. He, yeah, but he had come up, I think he was out of St. Louis and playing opera orchestras and stuff like that. And man, he was the real deal. But I think he saw that I could play some jazz. And he started giving me jazz gigs when he couldn't do them. And they were like, $50 for 3 or 4 hours in a restaurant. And I was in heaven.
Oh gosh, in 73 or 74, that was a gig. You know,
Oh, that was big time.
yeah.
Yeah. And then in college, I studied with Jim Self, who's one of the top studio guys still.
You know, I was fortunate enough to interview Eli Huberger.
Ah, yeah, yeah.
And he suggested I interview Jim. He goes, you know, Jim, I interviewed Jim. I said, I've never met Jim. You know, I've known a lot of tuba players in my time, but that's one guy who plays jazz that I haven't interviewed and I don't know. So I'm trying to keep this channel with people that I've met or know, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But wow, tell me about that. Tell me that process that he put you through.
You know, I think what I learned most from him is sound and musicality. He had the most gorgeous sound, and just terrific. And he was very good for me as far as teaching sight reading. I remember he'd come back from a studio call, and he'd have kept some of the cues, and he'd slap it in front of me and say, you know, this is what you got to be ready for. And luckily, I was a really good sight reader, and so I could generally read them. And he said, oh, that's pretty good. So he started sending me out to sub with, like the Don Ellis band had a tuba player.
Wow.
And I subbed with them several times, just rehearsals at the local.
Yeah, but that's not an easy sight reading book by any means.
No, it was great. And I was so impressed by the players in that band, and him also.
I remember when he came to Coast, and he had the electric band at the time. And so that book, you know, he was doing all those odd meter things and effects.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, Jim was great. And very, very well rounded. You know, he hit the classical, but he also worked on your ears, and you know, he wasn't just playing scales till you bled.
Yeah, that's, of course, you know it. You're one of the people in our business who kind of, and I'm one of these people too, by the way, that kind of view me as an imposter. I'm really not a dyed-in-the-wool. I didn't take the lessons from the studio tuba players. I kind of fell into tuba because of Dan and Brian and those guys. I had taken several lessons from people like Howie Shear and some studio trumpet guys, but I was somebody pretending to be a tuba player when I started playing Dixieland and stuff, and I've made my living at it. And I always got the feeling that people like you and Westy sort of go, yeah, well, he's really a trumpet player, you know.
I'm so pleased you mentioned Westy, and I shouldn't be mentioned in the same breath. What a guy he was! Holy smokes!
Because of one of the jazz bands he played trombone in, and I played tuba in. We actually ended up being roommates for about 3 years. Wow. On the road. And people go, how do you know all these tuba players? Well, there you go. You know, it's not like I was actually going out and doing two tuba bands. It just sort of happened.
Yeah.
No, phenomenal musician. Not only just a wonderful person, but a phenomenal musician, which kind of dovetails nicely with our Banjo Mania experience, our shared experience. And I know that they're working on another album now, right?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, that's what I heard through the grapevine. I didn't hear that from Brad or Doug, but I heard through the grapevine that they're working on maybe another project.
Excellent.
And Brad and I actually just kind of reconnected. I interviewed him for the channel.
I saw it.
Oh, good. Yeah, it was a good interview. I texted him afterwards and told him how much I realized I missed our friendship because it'd been a while.
Yeah, as do I. He's a sweetheart.
But for those of you who don't know, I was in a group called Banjo Mania, which was 3 different kinds of banjo and a tuba for 6 years. And Doug just couldn't handle the fact that I couldn't remember anything. We would try these routines, and there'd be routines. And I'm an off-the-cuff guy. I always stood in the back line and just tried to throw wrenches into whatever they were trying to do. And of course, Doug is the guy who likes to hone and act, and that's great. I mean, I understand that. But anyway, the short story is that that Westy followed me into that band first and took over, and he found out that he was like I was, that he was, you know, not always the easiest guy to work with, and had a just comedic wit that you can't really corral. And so Westy left, and Charlie ended up taking the gig. Both of these guys were my very close friends. And so it made things really kind of strange, I think, in some ways. Don't you think?
Yeah, a little bit. And I have the order mixed up. I thought I followed you and then Westy after me, but that was so long ago. I'm not sure.
For me, it was only yesterday. No. Uh, well, anyway, yeah, it's one way or the other. I
Yeah.
thought they had recruited Wesley from our time we spent playing against the Palm Springs Yacht Club somewhere. But that's neither here nor there.
Yes.
And then you spent, I was so envious and we'll talk about it a little bit, but when you got the job at the park,
Mm.
because that was a great gig for you.
Yeah.
How
Once
long,
again, like,
how long were you at Disneyland? Oh,
well,
I know.
40 years. I officially retired um, 2 years ago,
What year did you start with it?
78.
Now, was your first intro into that? Was that the Main Street Maniacs and Thunder Mountain Boys, or did you do something before that?
It was before that, but the same. Different, but the same. It was the Main Street Maniacs, but it was the group with Ralph Reynolds, Hal Proppy, John Reynolds, Steve Resnick, Paul Woltz played in the group. It was.
Is that the one? Is that the one that Howard did too for a while?
I don't think so. That was the Banjo Kings
Okay.
with Larry Wright and a couple other banjo guys, and Paul Waltz, of course.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, that was a great group, and then and that lasted pretty much just through the summer, and then the Thunder Mountain Boys were the genesis of the next group because the new attraction had just come in. They wanted a group that did Dixieland, or rather bluegrass. And if we could do, Dixieland also, that'd be great because they'd work us, wherever they needed us at the time.
So the personnel originally that was with Jorgensen, right?
Yeah. John Jorgensen, Doug Maddox, Dick Hardwick. I know.
No talent there.
Who'd have known?
Well, as you know, John's now a country god. I tell people the first gig I ever did with John was actually a surf gig. But anyway, that's so it boggles my mind that he has become such a star.
Yeah.
A lot of you guys have, which is good. Then I can claim that I actually know them.
Yeah.
I
You
tell
know what
people-
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, please.
What I learned from John, which was very interesting, is to kind of work or think out of the box as a bass player. And he was, I mean, there's two different kinds of cats, and most everybody's in between it. But John Jorgensen, Rob Verdi, who's a tenor sax player at Disney also, they just love to play essentially a duet with the bass line. They say they'll feed you stuff, and if you answer them, they're all over it. And so that's what they like. And other guys at the other end, I don't.
1-5-1-5-1-5.
Exactly. They want the trad stiff stuff. When they take a breath, I'll play a little fill, but and the trick is figuring who's what and what they like, and that can take a long time.
And be able to switch back and forth between the two at times, depending on the size of the band and who's in it. Absolutely. I played with guys who, the extremes you're talking about. I've seen both those guys. I've seen the guys who are so busy that the front line can't find any room to play, and I've seen guys that are so simple that the big gaps are left everywhere because the front line's also playing sparsely, and that can be good if you're in the correct style and era. But I was talking to John Van Houten because he actually dipped his toe into that pool at Disney. I think it was Brian Atkinson who actually got him to try and play some Dixieland once or twice.
Uh-huh.
And John said they loved me because he would write out changes. I would just play 1-5-1-5-1-5. I never did it. Anything else I didn't play. Every so often I'd get brave and try to do a leading line into the next chord. But for the most part, it was just 1-5-1-5, in two. And so we got talking about that also. But that's what you're talking about.
Yeah. So, yeah, to play with guys like that was, and we didn't know it at the time. It was just the stuff that band produced. Well, and I've been in, I think, a dozen different bands at Disney. And they're all great. But that one kind of was a little special, maybe mainly because it was the first one that I really was in a long time, and we really got cohesive.
Now, you were never in actually the Disneyland band proper, right? Or were
I
you?
was I was for a while. I was in a breakdown group that was called the Main Street Merchants Band or something like that, and we just worked half a day. So when the town band broke down after the morning sets, then we would do the rest of the day.
Okay. 'Cause as you saw on the, Charlie and I both belonged to a tuba forum, but I think I was actually the guy who invited you onto that. And we were talking about the tuba players who went through the park. I never was at the park. I'm one of the few guys who, and we talk about it in some of my other interviews, but there was a reason. But a lot of guys did. We were talking about Les Benedict. I just did an interview with not too long ago, and Randy Anglin and Bob Burstein and Art Dragon and all these tuba players or trombone players who play tuba went through a Disneyland. Thank goodness for Disney at times.
Yeah, I'll say.
So let my brains keep spinning here. It's 40 years.
Yeah.
Now, after like Main Street Maniacs and Ralph and all those guys split, what other bands did you get stuck in?
I was very fortunate to get in a group out of the Disneyland Hotel called the Bellhops, which was essentially a brass quintet. And they did everything from Disney tunes to light classics to Dixieland. And that was a great group. And wonderful players and just funny guys. I would come home with stomach aches most days just from laughing. So it was a great group. And that group actually went through several permanent different names, the Bellhops for a long time. And then if they did some construction work at the hotel, and we dressed up in painter's garbs and were the Splatter Tones. And they were doing some work at the park right at the main gate, and so we wore construction outfits, just regular jeans and the vests and hard hats, and we were the hard hats. And then we were the mistletoes at the park if we were playing Christmas stuff. So, and then the Queen's Royal Band, we did that a couple of years when Fantasyland was being revamped. And so we would be out by Small World and playing for the Mad Hatter and what other groups. And just crazy stuff, but fun.
That's wonderful. When Disney took over the Queen Mary, did you end up over there also?
Never did.
Never
No.
did.
No.
How about Angel Stadium?
A couple of times, not much. Yeah.
Of course, those are all Disney owned, but a lot of people don't realize, or were at one time. A lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, that's very cool, sir. Now, I didn't start playing string bass very much later when for my parents' anniversary, I put a band together and learned how to play string bass just because they wanted swing. And that's when I picked it up. And then I did the surf band with Rusty and Brad and those guys and played Fender then. But I've given all that up. I could never develop enough calluses to make me happy. And I mean physically happy.
Yeah. It takes its toll.
It certainly does. Now, I think the last time I actually saw you playing, unfortunately, was at a funeral.
Yes.
Maybe, I mean, I may have been since then, but that's the last one that sticks in my memory. And it was for a lady who was a great champion over at Orange Lutheran High School, Betsy. And I happened to be just attending the funeral, and you were in a little Dixieland group with a few guys. And you played brass choir that day, too, I think. I think you did double duty there.
Could be.
And I walked in, and you looked at me, and you said, Dan, I haven't played this in a while, so don't be too judgmental. How can I be judgmental of Charlie Warren, ladies and gentlemen? I ask you. The guy is a phenomenal player. But I appreciated the salute.
Yeah.
And now you're playing, or you were up until March. None of us are playing right now. I'm doing a few distanced things for different jazz clubs. But you've been a member of the Pacific Coast Horns, the most recent group, right?
Yeah, that was the Bellhops. After all Disney ended.
Who's the personnel?
Well, right now it's Kurt Curtis, who was one of the early members, Mitch Masilnikar, say that again, who's a French horn player, and he was also an early member. Myself, and then two kind of recent additions, Jeremy Swem on trombone and Tim Gill on trumpet, who's also a fantastic singer and arranger. So it's a nice group. But we only play once a year, maybe. We do little community concerts, and everybody's so busy that they're just out and back. So
It sounds like just a wonderful group to play with. It must be a delight when you get a chance to actually get together and do
Yeah.
some stuff.
yeah, very nice.
And speaking of arranging, I remembered, didn't you write once an entire arrangement of In a Mist for multiple tubas or something like that?
I don't know. I've done a lot of silly stuff. I think I did the whole 1812 overture for 12 tubas.
I just remember hearing some of that stuff that you.
Crazy.
Well, now, no, I think it's cool. Rich Mattson had that tuba consort album where he did tubas in a rhythm section.
Yeah.
There's another thing I wrote down here. I was trying to remember. You played my wedding, didn't you?
I don't know.
Carlton Conrad and Gary Halapoff and Brian Shaw.
Probably so then.
Because I was trying to remember who I knew, because I got married while I was at Coast. And I was trying to remember who was in that brass choir, and I think you were the tuba player. I wrote all the arrangements, which was a mistake. But I was just trying to remember.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah, isn't it funny about getting old? Isn't that wonderful that
Yeah.
all of a sudden you've got these big blind spots in your memory?
Sometimes.
Well, a lot of people wish I had bigger blind spots in my memory, but I just remember our time together being one of the happiest times of my life. That the first those years at Coast, it was
Yeah.
such a magical time. And of course, the Orange Coast College Jazz Festival, where I met Alf Clausen and all those guys. Alf
Yeah.
ended up arranging an album with me for me, and I just remember that. Yeah, he and I haven't been in touch for about 20 years, like all the rest of the people I'm talking about. But when he was at the Jazz Festival, I had an opportunity to put down an album of some original tunes, and it never got released because my financing got drained.
Yeah.
Long story, but and not a happy one. But what can I say? So good to see you, man. How's the family? Now you have some kids. I have some. I have grandkids. You have grandkids now?
I have one.
Can you wrap your head around that?
No. No.
Yeah, I've actually got. I got three. One of them sitting on the couch here playing video games because I'm actually at my son's house right now doing this. Because I've got two toddlers staying at my house with my daughter. So I've actually got three grandkids, and my son Aaron is the one who's been booking all these things and kind of semi-producing the show.
Nice.
And he's now the band director at Orange Lutheran High School.
Wow. Great school.
Charlie likes your school, Aaron.
Yeah. No, I worked at Concordia for several years as the applied tuba teacher there. And all the great students, that's where they came from.
Well, they've had Kent Hannibal was the director there for a long time. Aaron's been there now, I think, for 4 or 5 years. Foolish boy, following his dad's footsteps like that. He actually went to APU.
Nice.
And went in as a trumpet player, came out as a French horn player, and now he's back on trumpet again. But it's funny, he got the gig because of John Van Houten, or not didn't get the gig, but that's why he ended up there. When I was, I don't know if you know, I spent 12 years as the teacher at Canyon High School as a marching band guy, not actually teacher of note. And so I had a student who wanted to go to college, and I called up John. I said, I've been out of this for so long, where should I send a tuba student? Of course, John recommended the schools he was at, APU and Citrus, and I think he was at Long Beach then or something. I don't remember.
Could be.
And so I called up Azusa Pacific and talked to those guys, and my wife said, ask him about Aaron, ask him. So that's how Aaron ended up there. And my tuba student I wanted to go ended up at Chapman. And John Van Houten says, not Fred Green. They don't even have enough people to put together a brass choir there.
Yeah.
Hi,
But
Fred.
they have Fred. Yeah.
Hi, Fred, if you're watching.
Yeah. Fred is my second greatest tuba teacher. He is wonderful.
They're both phenomenal. And what's funny is they both went through that Dixieland band I started with at the Fullerton Airport called Orange Peelers. And they both played the tuba chair in that. I was playing first cornet at the time, along with John Aldred. And all these different guys went through that band. And we're talking about, before there was light. There used to be a restaurant called the Crosswinds at Fullerton. And that's was my very first Dixieland gig on anything. And all those guys came through that. So I'm surprised I never got you there. Maybe I didn't know you yet. I'm not sure, but I try to drag you into the worst things I do.
I'm ready.
Are you? Who knows? I may want to call on you as a tuba teacher somewhere. My son is now the director of the Impulse Drum and Bugle Corps.
Oh dear.
Yeah, he's following that line too. But I was talking to Charlie Aaron. He likes Orange Lutheran.
Okay.
So if you need an applied tuba teacher,
Possibly.
they're actually starting talks about how we're all going to deal with this lockdown in the education system. How do you tell me, Charlie? How do you teach a marching band online?
Yeah, beats me.
Well, see, you're no help.
No.
Well, listen, sir, I'm going to let you go. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Thank you for watching Trad Jazz today. Dan shows new interviews every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Make sure to check out the archive of past shows and please give us a thumbs up when you subscribe to the channel. Bye.